G'day and welcome to the Hunters Campfire podcast. My name's Mark and along with good mate Ian, we're here to help with all things hunting. If you're looking to start but don't know where to begin, you want to make the most of your next trip away or even plan that hunt of a lifetime, we've got something for you. You'll find our podcasts on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon and plenty of others. And if you want more, head over to our YouTube channel, The Hunters Campfire, where we have plenty of how-to and hunting videos along with the full video production of every podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and good hunting.
Good evening. Welcome back to the Hunters Campfire podcast. And tonight, I've been looking forward to this podcast for a very, very long time. We've got a special guest that we will keep nameless for a moment, and I'll welcome co-hosts Mark and Jono back to the podcast. How you going, fellas?
Good, mate. Good, very good. And how's yourself?
Oh, great. Other than the freezing cold weather that we've received literally overnight. Was told it'd be 4 degrees here this morning. It was minus 3.3, and the forecast tells us it's going to get cold tomorrow. So I hope my little lambs up the paddock can survive the night, but certainly brought on winter pretty quick.
It's for sure. It's a ride with vengeance, isn't it?
Yeah, it kind of closed the door on summer, didn't it? Went bang. That's it.
That's the end of it. So we'll have a quick around the grounds, but I should invite Errol Mason, the one and only Errol Mason. And if you don't know Errol, he's very well known for his Hunt Smart system and Secrets of the Sambar volumes. Amazing work that you've done over the years, Errol, and we'll get into the detail of that. But welcome to the podcast. Thanks very much for joining us. Good stuff, mate. So, as per usual, we'll just run around the grounds and just have a quick chat about some of the things that are going on. Mark, what's going on since our last catch up?
So I have a Savage 110 backcountry coming from Naya for review in 6.5 Creedmoor, which is a caliber I have never actually shot. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how that goes. The other exciting thing is I've bought another shotgun.
Oh, you bought it, did you?
Yeah. There's down on Target, there was a absolutely beautiful 28 gauge shotgun there. It's a CZ, but it's a US made CZ. So, you know, parts out of Turkey, probably assembled in the US. Couldn't resist it. I own it. You know, shoots those little battery size rounds. So that's my latest. I've got a thing for side-by-side shotguns, so whenever I see a good one, I end up with it. So
yeah, far out. Yeah, I've only ever shot with unders and overs.
So 20 gauges. Got to find a 20 gauge next. Got to find a nice 20 gauge.
No, very good. And you also have the Minecraft edition of the BRX in your possession.
That's right. Yes, the Minecraft edition. And the reason for those wondering why we're calling the BRX that we customised with Beretta the Minecraft, some wit on social media decided to have a laugh at it and call it
Dave Willie Witt.
No, I don't think it was Dave Willie to start with. But someone made a disparaging comment about the camouflage pattern looked like a kid designed it via Minecraft. So we decided to grasp that comment with both hands and rebrand it the Minecraft rifle. So,
Errol, if you're not familiar with Minecraft, it's a very digital, pixelated, popular game that kids love. So it's a camo pattern that looks like that.
It's what they call a digicam, and if you see it on our Instagram, you'll see that every picture incorporates a little Minecraft guy dancing with it too. So it's pretty cool. We're owning it.
I'm glad somebody brought it up because that saved me having to do it. Jono, what's happening?
Well, I popped to on Target with Mark, and the first thing he did was show me the shotgun that he was thinking of buying. It is a beautiful little shotgun. I will admit. I actually started shooting shotguns with a side-by-side, so I do have a liking for them. I prefer shooting side-by-side to over and under. I love the traditional shotgun. But the main reason for popping to On Target was for Mark to get the Minecraft gun, but for me to pick up my Benelli Lupo, which is absolutely beautiful. It's a gorgeous little rifle, and I'm really looking forward to getting it hunting. So that was the highlight of my week.
It is most definitely a lovely looking rifle. There is no doubt about that.
So I'll be sharing some pictures of that pretty soon.
Good stuff.
To get it hunting.
Yeah, it does a wonderful combination of timber and metal, but in a very modern angular design. So it's
absolutely.
a lovely.
I don't know. I know you've got one. I was having a look through the manual, and you can adjust the drop of the comb and everything.
Yeah, everything.
It's pretty awesome. It's
a very
modular,
very futuristic. It's just got all of the modern componentry that you could expect from Benelli. So I mean, it is nice. You've got the timber one. I've got the synthetic version. When I picked it up, it just has a build quality about it that I probably wasn't expecting. Just looking at the marketing or the pictures, but the smoothness of it is just nothing I've really felt from a rifle. You slide the bolt forward, you barely even feel it pick. It just slides in excellent. Well, my highlight, very similar to yours, although I went down to On Target a little bit earlier than you, picked up that Benelli Lupo, and it is a beautiful rifle. But I also got the Beretta Ultra Leggero under over sporter shotgun, which I'll be doing for a bit of field work, teaching Missy, my indicator, bit of retrieve work with the local hare population, which is going to be great. But yeah, I would be pretty keen, Mark, to maybe trade the modern Ultra Leggero with you for a week and try the side by side. It'd be quite an interesting experience.
Sure. Well, I have.
See how that goes.
I have a 12 gauge side by side, and I will soon have a 28 gauge, which is tiny little caliber. But that particular one you picked up, that is a fantastically light shotgun too.
It's their lightest build.
Wonderful.
Yeah, lightest built shotgun ever. So it'd be interesting to see what the recoil's like. They've taken quite a bit of timber out of it.
Yeah.
But that's the way they're doing it.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I want to shoot super heavy out of it, but it's certainly
find out.
It was certainly like, because I've got the Frankie, and that's more of a standard under over design.
Yeah. Errol, I had a good read of your biography that was on the website, but I'm trying to cast my mind back to whether you did a lot of work with shotguns at all. Did you have a time with shotguns, or still do, or have a preference? Do you like your side by sides or under overs?
Never been a great shotgun person. As a boy on the farm, the best we had was a single barrel H&R. The ones Harrington Richards.
Yeah.
Later on, I had a Winchester 101.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually had a Watson Brothers 28 gauge. Made in the UK. Perhaps my favourite gun was a Remington 1100 for ducks. But I've mostly been a rifle shooter. Bruno Model 2s. Yeah, probably my favourite rifle of all time. But rifles has been my main thing. Rifles and rifle shooting. Accuracy.
You recognise a few of those names, Mark?
Yeah, well, look, there was the 101 was quite a nice side by side, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was. I owned that in the early 1970s. Bought it in Robertson Sports Store, Queen Street, Brisbane. 1970. Based on Nick Harvey's recommendations in Sporting Shooter.
There you go. It was
likewise. Bruno Model 2. Bought it from Robertson Sports Store, Queen Street, Brisbane. I was in the infantry at the time with 9RA, training for Vietnam, and used to follow Nick Harvey religiously in Sporting Shooter from the time I was 14, I reckon. And I bought that for $99.
Yeah.
Brand new, mate. Shot hundreds of rabbits with it. 4x32 Tasco scope, IMI hollow points, Nick Harvey's recommendation for zeros, spot on at 25, 1 inches high at 50, spot on at 75, 3.2 inches low at 100, head shoot rabbits all day.
Unreal.
And go on.
I bet you walked out of the store with it over your shoulder and walked down the street.
That's dead right, mate. wasn't an issue.
No.
That wasn't an issue.
Remember they used to have the barrel in front where they just had the old 303s, and there were so many of them. They were just muzzle down in a barrel, and you could kind of like, it was like a bargain bin. You used to rat through and try and find the best one.
I never had that opportunity being a kid on the farm. We never went anywhere, but you did get the Weekly Times, and the last 2 pages of Weekly Times was all Army disposal ads, including 303s for virtually nothing. Forward 308s.
That's it. Well, Robinson's had a barrel. They used to have like...
Oh, did they?
It was just it was literally a barrel, and they should just throw them in the barrel.
Right.
And you used to literally kind of, oh, this one's okay. Yeah. And, oh, no, hang on, I reckon this one's a bit better. And they were nothing. They were absolutely nothing cost. Well, it was almost like, if you buy one, you got one free type thing, because they wanted to move the stock.
Well, it's a bit of a story how I got bought my first high-powered rifle. I was at the School of Infantry, Ingleburn. We got paid peanuts. I mean, peanuts. We didn't get 20 cents an hour, mate. Yeah. Anyhow, we had bingo at Ingleburn at the School of Infantry camp. And I won the bingo jackpot, $80. Mate, I was rich. What did I do? Straight into Shooters Home, George Street, Sydney. They had a Model 670 push feed Winchester, second hand. A shore sight scope. Ever heard of a shore sight scope? I bought it.
What is that, Errol?
Mate, it was almost a no-name brand.
That's a brand.
But the Model 670 was a very basic push feed 243.
Yep.
And later on, when I moved to Brisbane to Nine when I'd come back, I had it rebarreled at Robertson Sports Store. And this goes to show you how long TSE, Total Solutions Engineering, have been around. That was 1971. They rebarreled that to 308 for me.
Oh, okay.
And here I am. I come back from a fully tacked bivouac, right? Training for Vietnam, living on ration packs, living in a hoochie, freezing cold, walking all day, carrying a M60. That was my role. I'd come back. What do you reckon I did? Did I go to the nightclub? Did I go to the pub? Mate, loaded all that hoochie, ration packs, crap gear that we were given back in those days. Absolute rubbish. Into my FB Holden, out to Gundawindi. West of Gundawindi to Two Beer, where there was heaps of wild pigs at the time feeding on or wrecking and feeding on sorghum crops. So that was my first experience. Again, living in a hoochie for 2 or 3 days. But God, I wouldn't call the king my cousin. It was such an experience.
Yeah, right. Well, I can tell you that I live on the Darling Downs.
Okay.
And you missed a few because they've bred up since you
left. Oh, yeah, I reckon. I missed plenty. I missed the first one I ever fired at.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you
that 670 was I think it was an American supermarket rifle.
Yeah, it would have been. It was a basic.
Yeah, I had one. I had one. I had one very briefly in 243 as well. And there was like the Model 70, and then there was like the sold at supermarkets. That particular one.
No floor plate. There was no floor plate.
That's right. It was basically
blind.
That's it.
Anyhow, that's how I got my first rifle. Bingo. School of Infantry.
Amazing.
There you
go. Let's step you back a bit. So obviously went through some military service, but tell us a bit about what got you into hunting to start with, and how that came about, because it wasn't too long into your hunting that you decided to chase sambar, was it?
Well, I didn't start hunting sambar until I was pretty well 28. However, how did I get into hunting in the first place? I think how I got into hunting was how so many of us do. I think it's in your genes. I just think it's genetic. My mother was one of about 5 or 6 kids. Her and a twin brother. My mum lived to 100, 7 months and 3 days, and only passed about 18 months ago. My mother was a born hunter. My mother owned staghounds, whippets, fox terriers, ferrets. My mum told me she was the best ferreter in the area because Isabel Ferrier told her that she was the best ferreter because she was the only one that filled in the rabbit burrows after they dug them out to get the ferrets. Anyhow, they fished. They lived off the land, and this photo behind me, which you can't see now due to the video, I put it there because that's where I was raised, in that view over that serpentine one in River Valley. So I was raised with my mum's genes. Her brother Jack, twin brother Jack, was a hunter, and it was just in my blood. Was it a decision? No, it was something I had to do. It's not something my father had no interest. None of the brothers mostly had no interest, but it was something I was just driven to do. So I started off with a single barrel at home, any opportunity, hunting rabbits, hares, foxes, ducks, and then later on when I went to School of Infantry, I used to go to Elliston. You know what Elliston is? Moonane Flat, Elliston Station at Moonane Flat from Scone. It's the one that Packer bought. Packer bought the place. And I used to hunt wallaroos there. I mean, there was a huge number of wallaroos and foxes. And that was mostly with, quite frankly, a Creco 22 Magnum and that 670. And from there, I was transferred to Ingleburn and School of Infantry. Sorry, I was transferred to a Nogra, 9-row Nogra, and then I got into pig hunting. And I went on a few pig hunts in more recent years, but the last time I went on a pig hunt, I think we shot 50 pigs in 2 days. And I said to my mate, Jeff McClure, there's got to be more to hunting than this. You know, it was really just vermin shooting. We shot them, left them. And from that moment, I just got into sambar hunting. And I've never changed. I've never looked back. I'm addicted. It's once you get into sambar, you're addicted. And the only remedy is more and more sambar hunting. And I, you know, for 8 years, from the time I was 28, look, I was a rover playing football, so I was very fit when I took it up. And I did what was called back in that day, walking them up. You know, it's pretty well spook and shoot. And I did that for 8 or 9 years, and every 12 days I got lucky. Every 12 days of spook and shoot, I managed to shoot one. But then in 1989, I just got absolutely fascinated with the idea of trying to learn about them and trying to get great photos. So I had this custom rifle built for me by Jack Miller, who used to own Shooter Supplies in Russell Street, Melbourne. And Jack built, I bought a mint FN Morza 98 parade rifle, full wood, stripped it down, kept the original barrel. Jack just profiled those acute steps out of it, had it magneported, Lee 6 fiberglass stock, but one of the first of its time. You know, they just weren't available at that time. I had it built up, and but before I really got to give it much use, I got fascinated with changing to camera. So in 1989, I went to Germany to study hunting and game management. I stayed with hunters in Germany and saw how game was managed and how they hunted and what firearms and tactics they used there. And while I was there, I bought my first professional camera, a Nikon F3 and a 300 f 4.5 IF ED lens, and used that. Got started photographing sambar, and back in those days, it was the best film was Kodachrome 64 ASA. Yeah, and you had to shoot it off a tripod. It was so slow. You know, it wasn't like today's ISOs. You can wind up to 12,800 or whatever. You were stuck with ISO 64. So I started photographing sambar with that, and through photographing sambar, I then really started to learn just how damn smart they were. Before that, I didn't really get it. But once I started to photograph them, and here's the thing, I started at the Bunyip Sambar enclosure, 40 acres of forest, tea-tree swamp. And back then in 1990, the caretaker, Mike Harrison, had made sure that those deer were kept as wild as possible. He didn't want them domesticated. So I'm going down there thinking, oh, this is going to be easy to get a great photo of a sambar with my new Nikon F3 400 lens or RRO tripod. Bugging me dead. I couldn't find one. I couldn't find them.
How big was the land?
It was only 40 acres. But it was forest and with a big, thick tea tree swamp and impenetrable swamp. one afternoon, I spotted these deer with their heads down, actually sneaking away from me 150 yards ahead of me. They were in absolute what is known now as sneak mode. And then I got it. These deer really are smart. And I guess that just really got me in. And I went to the Bunyip enclosure every Sunday afternoon for 10 years. And look, a lot of what I've done, the journey, has been by chance and opportunity. That was an incredible opportunity. And at the time, I never foresee what a valuable opportunity it was. But by going there for 10 years, every Sunday, to photograph known age deer in known age state of biology, known age state of pedicle growth, antler growth, velvet growth, rubbing out. It was known how many days since they'd cast, how many days. So we knew how many days since they rubbed out, since they cast. It's amazing that these deer take 165 days to 185 days to grow their antlers. When they're at around that 30-inch mark, they're taking 5.5 to 6 months to grow. That's an amazing amount of time. Then they carry them for the balance of the year in hard antler. So I was able to get these high quality photographs and all this data. And at the same time, I was also going to the Pendleside Sambar enclosure at Warrialloc, which also kept a huge amount of data on all their enclosed deer, including antler casting, wallowing dates, birth dates, gestation periods, as did the Bunyip. So I tapped in to all this data, and especially also into the data that was also taken from Pendleside by Max Downs, who was a professional wildlife biologist, and he ended up writing the report, the Forest Deer Project, which included a lot of that data. Anyhow, when I come around to doing volume 1 of my book, that data from Bunyip and enclosure and Pendleside was so valuable, and so were the photos. And at the moment, this week, last month, I've been flat out. I've got the antlers from one stag from Pendleside, his whole 14 years.
Wow.
14 years, left and right
Prince?
antler, matching. Yep, Prince of Pendleside. He died prematurely at 15. They lived to 24, but he died prematurely at 24. He was shot by a poacher when he was 9, smashed his shoulder blade. When he died, I actually got his shoulder blade, recovered it. And the calcification of that shoulder blade, the repair was amazing. But he survived that 45 silence, 45-70, 400 grain bullet. His mate in the same enclosure wasn't so lucky. They killed him and took his head off. But I've got those antlers, and I just invested a huge amount of money to get an aluminium pole constructed, powder coated here in Bairnsdale. And it's a totem pole with those antlers. It's over 2 meters high. Got our big logo on the top, and I'm taking it to the Wild Deer Expo. It's going to be a feature of our stand at the Wild Deer Expo this weekend coming. And it's just amazing. And in volume 1 of the book, there's a table my wife developed with all the data of all those antlers, the weight of each antler, length, diameter, etc. So look, I've been fortunate in my journey. A lot of my journey has been luck, but I guess you make your own luck by just getting out there and doing it, being committed.
Yep, you've got to make some of your own luck.
Go on.
When you were in Germany, you said you went over to Germany to learn game management.
Yes.
What did you take away from Germany? I'm going to be really naive here, and I'm fairly sure that Sambar aren't residents in Germany.
Well, certainly they're not. No, but they have roe deer, red deer. The main deer numbers are a roe because they're so small. A roe deer only weighs 18 kilos. A roe deer buck is so small he has to actually reach upwards to eat the head off, take the head off wheat. I've got photos of it. They'll fit in a 40-litre day pack. which I bought when I was in Germany. I went to Franconia, it's like the Myer of hunting stores, and I bought a roe pack, a roe buck rucksack.
Odin, was it?
But what I take away from Germany in terms of game management, well, it's highly organised, but the truth is you have to be wealthy because the whole of Germany is broken up into, maybe 10,000 acre patches of hunting leases. And back then in 1989, when I was there, hunting lease was 8,000 to 10,000 Deutschmarks. You had to be wealthy. It was a sport for the wealthy in Germany. But to obtain a license, you basically almost had to do a degree in hunting. You had it was a very comprehensive training course, and they work closely with the farmers. The leasee of the hunting lease had to compensate farmers for damage by the wild to his crops. He'd also make arrangements, of course, with the farmer to leave parts of the crops unharvested for the wildlife. And the whole country was just a mosaic of forest, farmland, and high seats everywhere. They hunted primarily out of high seats, or tree stands, as we would know them. And they're everywhere. You can see them from the autobahns. When you're in a high seat, as I was in Germany, you're sitting on the edge of the village. But the thing that it lacked, that we are so fortunate to have, it had no wildness. The wildness was had been completely tamed from the whole of the country. Whereas we've got this incredible wildness and these incredible Sambar Deer, which are, the epitome of wildness itself.
Yeah. So being such a different place to hunt, how much of that game management learning were you able to bring back here and layer across wild Sambar and in the Australian wilderness? Because you're clearly not managing farmland here.
Virtually nothing. No, the most where I picked up the most important knowledge for if you own your own private area of mountain forest here in Victoria, for management would be from the American whitetail.
Okay.
Yeah, I subscribed to Deer and Deer Hunting magazine from 1994. That was a fantastic magazine. And then later, Quality Deer Management Association, Quality Whitetail magazine. The knowledge from that, the science from those magazines was so much more applicable and helpful to Australian situation if you're fortunate enough to actually be able to buy a decent swath of mountain forest country, which a lot of people are doing now. A lot of people have bought up, 400 or 500 acre and larger areas of mountain forest. And they're putting in crops. They're putting in watering points. They're putting in tree stands. I had 600 acres, and that's what I did. That's where I ran my training courses. And I put in tree stands. I put in watering points. I put in huge amounts of fertilizer and seed, a 4-deer seed mix. I spent ages up there on foot with a chest spreader, fertilizer, seed. It was a great experience. When COVID hit, I sold that, but I've still got the rights, leased the rights to run the training courses there. But it's amazing 600 acre of mountain forest, which just lends itself to perfect being able to watch Sambar unalarmed with a group of training course participants, 8. Sure, you can still spook the deer easy enough because they can hear camera shutter at 240 yards. They hear the subdued whisper at 240 yards. On the course, blokes get to try fire across the gully at them. Well, take a simulated shot. I say, don't dry fire because at 300 yards, that Sambar will hear the firing pin fall and bolt, and sure enough, they do. So, but that block was so steep that it's such an incredible place for observing and watching what unalarmed Sambar really do. And for many people who do my training course, that's the first time they've ever seen unalarmed Sambar in their life, and they're amazed at their behaviour. And as soon as they see them, the way they behave, they realise, hey, And here I am walking around the bush, stumbling, all the noise I'm making, and I think I'm going to get close to these deer because they're always wired. They're wired for predators the whole time.
Mm.
They might look relaxed, but they are just one click from right on it. Right on.
So I asked a friend of mine who's read everything that you've possibly put out, from all of the books and bits and pieces, and he's from Victoria, but has spent a lot of his life up here in Queensland, dreaming about going back to Victoria and chasing sambar every year. But he asked a question. I think it's a question that you might have been sort of alluding to, and I asked him what he might ask you if he had the opportunity. He said to ask about the zone of silence. Does that make sense to you?
Zone of silence is 3 most probably important words in the whole sambar vocabulary. Absolutely. The zone of silence applies to every creature on earth. Look, I'm just happy to give you a very, very detailed understanding what a zone of silence is and why it's so essential. It's essential to every creature. Every prey species on earth must be able to optimize their senses. Hearing, smell, vision. The only way you can optimize those senses is to be in an area where there is no air movement, no wind. Wind creates noise. Wind creates noise over the ear. If there's no noise, no wind, you got total silence. When you got total silence, you can hear a pin drop. When there's total silence, there is no branches falling out of trees as in wind. There's no twigs falling. If there's a twig crack, it's got to be a predator. It's not a branch falling, a twig falling. So all prey species gravitate to zones of silence for the absolute protection, optimized use of their senses to avoid being the next meal. And look, way back in, I first identified this way back in, early 1980s. I was an absolute novice. Whatever mistake you could do then, I'd done it over and over and did it over and over for the 8-9 years of walking them up when I knew nothing. Anyhow, I'd followed these fresh tracks up over a saddle, and everything I did then was totally wrong. But the bottom line is, I got to sit down. I watched, but not until I'd spooked the deer that were on the opposite face, and they bolted. And then I sat down to consider what I'd just done. And while I was sitting there, in the half hour I was sitting there musing about how I spooked them, how I should have approached this, I'm watching all these prey animals. They're all here in this zone of silence. This gully was just a quiet zone, total. And suddenly I realised all these prey animals are there. There's rabbits, there's birds. And then I noticed, there was a fox sneaking through, looking for rabbits. And I realised there was so many prey species in this small gully. It was bloody amazing. And then I'd read in a book called A Herd of Red Deer, written by Fraser Darling, a wildlife biologist from the UK, who studied a herd of red deer in Scotland and published this book in 1933 called A Herd of Red Deer. And in that book, there is just one sentence. And he says, "We found the stags where there was no sound in the herbage. It was a zone of silence." And that's it. I bought that book. I bought the recent paperback copy with colour photos in it. I've gone back to that very sentence because I thought later, I think he must have written more than that about this. So I've gone back to read what else I'd missed. But no, I hadn't. That's all he said. But as soon as I saw these prey species and the sambar in this zone of silence gully, I just got it. It was just a light glow moment. And from that time, it just became so apparent in all my observations. That's where you find these deer. You won't find them in windswept forest spots. They just won't be there. Someone read volume 1 of my book, and he was hunting cheetal deer. He's from Queensland. And he rang me up, or he emailed me. He said, we're hunting, and we couldn't find a cheetal. He was out at Charters Towers. It was a terribly windy day. And he remembered what I wrote in volume 1 about all prey species gravitate to a zones of silence. So they went looking for a zone of silence. And they found a huge mob of cheetal, shoulder to shoulder, in this only quiet spot. That's where they were. It's an absolutely essential, fundamental point to understand in hunting. First, find your zones of silence, and how do you do it? You use your binoculars. You look for where there's no foliage moving with your binos.
Oh, okay.
So you'll often be walking through I found it the last trip we went on, you're walking through areas and you find yourself in a quiet basin that's, was out of sight. You sort of stumble across it. I often think that, if you're hunting in these areas, especially up Queensland way where it's warmer, you walk into an area and it just feels cool and it feels nice and it feels calm. These are the sorts of places you're talking about.
Exactly. Look, I was guiding people on Fallow back in 2000, and we're on this windswept face up north of Swiss Creek. And, it was absolutely windswept. But we came around the spur line, we crossed over the spur line, and suddenly we're in a zone of silence. It was like absolute windswept noise to suddenly nothing, total silence. As soon as I noticed that, as soon as we entered the edge of that zone, I just dropped on the ground with the clients and started the glass instantly. If we'd have kept walking, we wouldn't have got a shot at those fellow because they would have bolted. But we dropped straight down, and that's the key. As soon as you enter a zone of silence, drop on the ground, binos out, glass. That's where the animals will be. And sure enough, that's where these fellow were, and these guys were able to take a shot unalarmed in their beds from 80 yards.
So
zones of silence.
When you hear about deer and their home range and their territories and things like that, this zone of silence, is it more important for does with fawns, or is it more important for smaller groups? Is it less important for stags that are roaming and looking? They're not going to go too far out of home range, I imagine, so they must all have a zone of silence, so to speak, in their active range. That'd be fair?
It's important to all of them. They all bed in zones of silence. Doesn't matter the sex or the age. They will all bed in zones of silence. Stags will bed in zones of silence. Sure, stags roam much further. But when they're roaming, that's not bedding. When they're bedding, they bed. They all choose zones of silence.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I've got countless observations and photos of stags bedded in zones of silence. Countless. Video, photos, hinds. And all the prey species will be there. The wallabies, the kangaroos, they'll be there with them. Because remember, in Victoria's high country, they've been these prey species, wallabies particularly and kangaroos, they've been preyed upon pretty heavily by dingoes over the years. They're also alert.
I was just thinking about, your description there. When I took a fallow buck with Tim a couple of years ago, it was a really windy day, and we were slowly working our way downhill. The wind was really strong coming up, so we were walking into the wind, so we were right with the wind. And we were walking on a vehicle track, some private property, working on a vehicle track, and the vehicle track turned turned to the right, but the wind was blowing straight on, so we actually left the track, crossed the fence, and we're back off track in the scrub. And I remember we just, it was blowing a gale, and just as we crested and dropped below the wind line, there was about 20 bucks below us on a scrape that they'd created that was as big as a tennis court. So it was grass, and there was just this bare area under trees where they'd just been congregating, and that was exactly what it was. But for us, we were able to be in the wind and take the shot and shoot into the silence, so it gave us like perfect cover. We got within, I think I shot within 70, 80 meters. And I was sitting there with the wind just exposed. I was just on the very edge of it, and they were right in the gully there in this area. And that would have been for them, And I remember when we went down there and we got the deer and broke it up. That was the one where I fell over carrying out through a creek and went up. That was that they were in that, and that was below the wind line. So yeah, that would have been that would have been a zone of silence for those animals once they were in there. But we were lucky to actually be able to shoot into it.
Every creature gravitates to zones of silence.
Interesting to think about. Huh.
Yeah, well, we're all
think about what you would do. Every creature on Earth hates wind, including Homo sapiens. What do we do? The last place we want to be is in wind. We will do anything to get into a zone of silence out of wind. Think about everything you do. That's what we do. Same.
Well, on the property I hunt up on the block, up there in Brisbane Valley, the 2 dogs I've shot off that block, they've been in what you might call the dog zone of silence, hunting prey in there, and I've seen them both. They've both been in, and I've heard more dogs in there, but that's where they go. They're in that space. We call it the bush block. It's where it drops below and it's in a gully. But again, I've shot a number of deer out of there over the period of time, and some of the best rubs on the block are in that area as well too. So you'd class that again as a zone of silence. It's hard to glass because it's so dense, and so typical Brisbane Valley, there's no vista. It's just up and down and up and down and up and down. But that'd be I'd say I'm going to reevaluate that as a zone of silence as well, I think.
Yeah, well, in mountain forest country, zones of silence remain pretty well constant because typically you have 2 prevailing winds. In Victoria, you have a northwesterly and a southwesterly blowing over the spur lines. So you've got zones of silence down the side in all those gullies, and they remain pretty well constant. So you're going to have a zone of silence when there's a northwesterly. You're going to have a zone of silence when there's a southwesterly. And as I said, those winds. And look, this is a part of becoming a good hunter, is knowing your area. You get to know your area. That's the first thing you must do. Get to know your area, find a top spot, and get to know it and keep hunting that area all the time. Especially important with sambar, because sambar are so difficult to hunt. And one of the first things you need to understand or identify is the prevailing winds. Because the secret with sambar is you must keep your scent from the deer, and the only way you can do that is make sure you know the prevailing winds, direction, and you can't afford with sambar. You can't afford to be standing in the wind and taking the shot in the zone of silence, because the deer won't be there. You can't be on the spur line in the wind and take the shot, because your scent is at those deer in 30 seconds and they're gone. So you have to be off the spur line. The big no-no is to be on a spur line. For a start, you're silhouetted and they will spot your movement. Sambar spot movement. 300 yards away, silhouetted. 300 yards away, if you're down the side of that spur face, they can't see you at all. You can move around in the open, as I've done hundreds of times. But you must be off the spur line you must be out of the wind or the thermal, because otherwise you're allowing your scent to be taken into that whole gully and setting up that whole gully, and there goes your opportunity of getting a deer out of that gully. So, sambar hunting in Victoria's mountain forest, it really has a lot of skill about it, and it really is knowledge-based. Without knowledge, you're just a spook and shoot hunter, and you become very frustrated and pretty unsuccessful for the amount of time you put in. How do I know? I did it for 8-9 years. Whatever mistake you can make, I did it over and over. But once you understand the deer, once you understand their behaviour intimately, and understand the overlays that I write about in the books, and the overlays, the series of overlays, and many overlays relate primarily to the weather, the wagon wheel concept of sambar movement, the roadmap of sambar movement, and hunting pressure, and how they relate to large trees. When you factor those, and zones of silence, when you factor in these overlays onto any area of land, you can narrow down where they're going to be to 10% of total forest. You can just predict where they're going to be. And there's a few other variables. Won't give everything away on this podcast, but there's a few other very important variables that aren't understood, but made very clear in my book, about distance, how far they travel. That's so misunderstood. Sambar, here's the thing about sambar. They're big, lazy brown deer. They don't travel further than they absolutely have to, and they travel at snail speed, unless they're spooked by clumsy Homo sapiens.
Yeah, I was going to say I've seen plenty of sambar travelling at freight train speed.
Me too in the past. Me too. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. So without asking for the secrets, because that's not what the purpose of this was. What advice would you give to a travelling hunter though from Queensland that may not have the time to get to know a specific set of land? That walking them up process seems to be what's available to someone who doesn't live in the area and get to know a piece of land, other than coming back time after time and getting to know it. Are there specific strategies around the walk and stalk, or the spot and spook, or the spook and spot, that you would see people focus on?
No. Look, I know this is promoting what I do,
No.
but the reason I do what I do is because I've learned it's just the only way. You have to have the knowledge, and the further you live away from sambar habitat, the damn more sense it makes to maximise your opportunities when you do have the time to travel those long distances to hunt sambar. You've got to acquire the knowledge. The knowledge is the absolute power with sambar. You go from being almost too hard to hunt, get the knowledge, acquire the knowledge, and it's like it's almost too easy. You can turn the tables completely on the deer. But the knowledge I'm talking about has taken me 40 years to acquire. There were light globe moments over the last 23 years in particular, where sometimes I think, Errol, you're a bit slow. You should have got that earlier, But once you've got this basic knowledge, intimate knowledge of their behaviour, you really do become a hunter, not a bushwalker with a rifle. And you can become. Look at my success stories. I have people come from interstate. A good example, actually, my success stories. They're people from interstate, never hunted sambar before. They come from Queensland. They've come from Townsville, Cairns, Darwin, Newcastle. They've come from all over. What they do is they book the course. They take a week's leave. They come and do the course. I tell them a good spot to go to. They go. Within 3 days, they've shot their first sambar, doing exactly, they find it exactly where I say it will be in the conditions, the weather conditions of the day, and in relation to the topography and the wagon wheel rim, rim, the spokes, the hub, and they will shoot that deer just as I teach on the course. Stationary, broadside, unalarmed. Boom. One shot kill. Everything I teach on the course is you do not shoot at moving sambar. And it's so easy to make them, it's so easy when you've got the knowledge not to spook them because you know where they're going to be. You've narrowed it down with the overlays to 10% of total forest. You've then strategically planned how in low impact route to get to the spot to watch that to glass that 10% or ambush that 10% from tree stands, ground heights or whatever. And then you can take the shot when it suits you at an animal that's totally broadside. And if it's not moving, you can make it stop so damn easily and they will not spook. You can make them stop from 25 yards to 400 yards and they will stand broadside and stare at you. Now there's a thing, I shouldn't tell you this because I should be trying to sell you $4,000 binoculars. But if you buy off my website a bloody Fox 40 whistle for $30, of which about $9 is postage costs, my margin's about $4 after GST. You can make sambar stand up and bloody stare at you from 400 yards away that you will never find with $40,000 worth of optics. You can make them stop dead in their tracks at 200 yards, stand broadside for the shot. Fox 40 sonic blast whistle, 120 decibels, so bloody loud. If your mate blows it near your ear, you're just about deafening it. And when you blow it, you know what the sambar say? What the fuck was that? Right? Fuck! What was that? And they just stand up and stare. But the thing is, you make sambar stop broadside because the only thing that kills these deer is shot placement. Look, there's so much talk, and here's the big unsatisfactory thing about hunting. In all the time I've been in hunting, all the talk is about calibers, bigger calibers, a 375, this caliber, that caliber. It's as though there was nothing to know about sambar behaviour. My first rifle was a 375 because I was told I had to have it for walking them up. But what did I find? When they're spook and shoot and they're running, you cannot get a well-aimed shot. You do not get good shot placement. And what happens? The deer still run so far you can take another day to find them, even with the 375. However, when you make them stop and they're unalarmed, no adrenaline, broadside, double lung shot, high shoulder blade, spine shot, the classic shots, you can kill them stone dead with your 6.5 Creedmoor. You can kill them stone dead with your 6.5 by 55, which they use so well to kill moose in Sweden. You can use a 7mm 08. You will kill them stone dead because why? It has not killing a power has nothing to do with muzzle energy. It's the greatest myth in killing. 90% of killing is the destruction of a vital organ. All you need is a bullet that will penetrate deep enough to destroy that organ, and the bullet constructed well enough to keep penetrating to the other side of the animal and stop under the skin. It doesn't have to whip out the other side. It doesn't have to leave a blood trail. In fact, the fact is, most bullets that exit sambar never do leave a blood trail. It's a myth. Doesn't happen. You can sum up calibers required for sambar in about one paragraph. Most of the stuff about magnums is just from people who really don't understand. It's probably the most misleading thing for young hunters today. They've got to have a magnum in what is now super light rifles. The recoil and muzzle blast is enough to make any of them get a flinch, when the truth of the matter is what they should have bought was a 7mm 08, a 308, 270 or a 3006, and bought a decent bullet, a Barnes TTSX. You can go light for caliber. I use a 150 grain of my 3006. I've got a Remington 700 CDL stainless timber. It shoots 3 150 grain Barnes TTSX into less than 0.4 of an inch. 3 inches high at 100. It's 4 inches low at 300. And just recently, to maximise my accuracy in longer shots, I bought the latest rangefinder Swarovski binos and put all the data into the binos. Incredible invention. My tip for hunters is stop getting hyped and misled about calibers, and also all the nonsense about calibers. Sure, everyone's going to want to gun manufacturers going to want to confuse you because they want you to buy a new rifle, they want you to buy new ammo, new dies, but it's really misleading information. It's confusing and misleading.
I think you summed it up pretty well in your biography when you said that people started taking on larger calibers to shoot sambar when they realised that all they could do was shoot them in the hams as they were running away. So they needed to get all the way through that to be able to stop it as it ran off. So you're bang on.
Look, you've got to use a good bullet, and I think the best assessment summary of this, which I quoted in my Huntsmart book, was written by Thin Agard. Thin Agard. I've got his book, Selected Works. He sums it up in one paragraph, and I'm quoting him when I'm talking about 90% of killing power is shot placement to a vital organ. The rest of the deer is dead space. It's not killing space. People think, I hear them in gun shops talking about you got a dinner plate to shoot at size target. Well, that's rubbish. The dinner plate broadside on the Sambar, you got 4 inches of brachial plexus, huge double lung blood vessels. You got 4 inches, which will kill that deer. If you shoot on the edge of the dinner plate, you're shooting it's a slow bleeding wound. The deer will escape, could even survive. It is not a dinner plate. And here are the classic shots. So 1/3 up from the wither in line with the middle of the front leg. It is not behind the front leg. It is in line with the middle of the front leg. And all this is shown vividly in my books. And it's 1/3 down from the wither in line with the front leg. High shoulder blade spine shot. That is probably the best shot of all. And what I'm talking about is I'm just riding on the shoulders of giants. Most of what I've done in terms of a lot of what I teach, I'm riding on because I have a library, extensive library. I tap into the best experts on these subjects. Kevin Robertson, The Perfect Shot. The sharpshooter guys from Matt Grant from New Zealand, who've done an incredible amount of research into shot placement, killing effective bullets, how bullets kill. I was reading, I had a custom 9.3 by 62 made. FN action, commercial action, Roger Vardy, highly figured walnut, Dwayne Weeby bottom metal, TSE barrel, number 3 profile. It shoots half MOA. And I was reading recently a book on the 9.3 by 62. I just purchased it. It's called the 9.3 by 62 manual. It's pretty bloody enlightening. And the message is simple. It's got nothing to do with muzzle. It's got nothing to do with muzzle velocity. It's to do with a well-constructed bullet traveling at about 2,400 feet per second. It killed the biggest animals on earth in Africa, or the smallest antelope. And that's it for young hunters watching. I would say to you, do not get all hyped up and confused by this constant talk about calibers and bullets. Learn about the animal. Direct your energy and your resources to learning about the animal. That is the whole key to hunting. And I'm 70 now. In my next 10 years, that is what I want to focus on. I want to focus on bringing together, which is what I have been working on all this time, all the knowledge from anthropology, First Nation people, their skills, and synthesize that with what we do now know from modern science tells us. Modern science tells us about the rate of UV increase with elevation, about the decrease in temperature with elevation. It tells us about chill factors. We can tap into all this, put it together, and we become so much better hunters. And what I want to focus on in this area is not cross-gully hunting. Quite frankly, anyone with basic knowledge can shoot sambar across gully. If you can see across gully, you can, with basic training, you can shoot them standing on the opposite face with a rangefinder, modern optics. And in a lot of cases, they're not going to be able to hear you. They don't see you. Their defenses are pretty well negated. I want to focus on hunting in close, and that's real skill. And at the moment, I'm collaborating with a guy called Chris Pegg, who's only recently got into sambar hunting, but he's got into saddle hunting. It's a type of hunting, tree stand hunting, perfected in America, and it's quite intriguing. And it's all based upon pulleys and ropes, and where you can swing all around the tree. You're not restricted in your field of fire as you are with standard type tree stands, but it's about being in close. It's about possessing that knowledge about scent control, animal movements, to be able to set up spots and hunt animals that maybe are no more than 60, 70 yards away and as close as 10 to 20. And I think that's the new frontier for sambar hunting here. And an absolute challenge for those hunters who like to be challenged.
Saddle hunting.
Exciting times, quite frankly.
Is there truth to what I've heard that deer don't look up for predators? Is there truth to that?
I've been to India, spent 2 weeks on safaris in India, every morning, every night. I've never seen a sambar look up. I've never seen one look up here except when there was a noise made up in the tree. And I thought about this. When I was in India, I saw a lot of leopard trees. And I began to realize that there is such a thing as a leopard tree. There's the perfect tree for a leopard. It's got to have the horizontal bough of adequate thickness for it to lie on. It needs to be high enough off the ground so they can't be preyed upon by tigers. It needs to have adequate thick canopy above that bough to stop the sun and heavy rain. So guess what? Sambar would never go near that tree because all the leopard trails of scent of leopard all lead to that tree. Sambar would know that. So sambar don't need to look up worry about leopards. They know where the tree is. They know all the strategically placed leopard trees. They would stay away from them. So there's no need to look up, and certainly they absolutely do not. And they don't do it here in Australia either. And that's my explanation as to why they don't look up, given that their main predator is actually tigers on the ground, steaking close to the ground. That's where their main danger lurks all the time, 24/7. It's not from trees.
One of the other things that you said before about the whistle, the fox whistle.
Did I tell you that? I shouldn't have given you that secret. That was special. Go on.
But while I'm talking about it,
yeah.
Are you suggesting that you let that thing off at full noise?
No, absolutely. When I need to. Look, we've been on the face on a training course.
Back on the sambar, he honks at you and you whistle back.
Well, you know what? I think even when they're bolting, once they're far enough away, that whistle could still make them stop in their tracks and turn back and look at you.
Yeah, it's I haven't heard it used for sambar, but it was when we first started shooting years ago, it was a common thing, especially if you ever grew up anywhere, or if some of your first experiences shooting was shooting roots, is that you whistled. We used to carry, referees' whistles. Yeah. And you just give out the blast, and they just kind of go, well, what's that? It's like, whoa. Mm. That's what it was, and it would just pull them up. So yeah, it's interesting. I haven't heard it for Sambar, but I mean, I've certainly known, as Jono said, I've certainly known places around the world where having a whistle is a technique for getting an animal that's on the move to give you that stop. And I mean, you see guys do it here, when they're hunting red or anything like that, and the deer starts moving, you make it or something like that. Yeah, it's just bang, gives you that chance to pull them up. And I even seen those guys in the States using thermals. They'll talk to the pigs. Yeah. Okay, hey pig, and it just stops.
We're talking about the growth in deer numbers in Victoria, well, all over the country.
Yeah.
What do you have an opinion or anything you'd like to share about the action plan, the deer action plan that was out for consultation over the last few months?
Look, quite frankly, no. This is my take on it. There's a lot of tangents to go down. I just stick with this. Do my damn best to train as many hunters as possible, so they are absolutely efficient, effective hunters that can go out there and within a few days harvest deer without a problem. That's what I focus on. I focus on refining my system. I'm still up the bush all the time, although I haven't been for 7 weeks. I broke my ankle on a steep mountain face 7 weeks ago, carrying heavy camera gear, unbalanced, got in the log jam, tipped over backwards, leg caught, hobbled out down the steep mountain face on a bloody stick. I broke the fibula, ripped tendons off. So I haven't been out there the last 7 weeks. But I'll tell you, the beauty of that day was that morning I got the most incredible video. I've invested a huge amount of money again to buy the latest mirrorless Nikon gear, Z9, Z6IIs, 800, 6.3 lens. Because in the past, my focus has been photographs for books, the best photos. But now my focus is not just photos for books, but video for my training course modules, online modules I'm developing, and for YouTube promotional stuff. And the latest Nikon mirrorless cameras are just mirrorless cameras are a total different ball game for video. DSLRs just are obsolete now for video. Great for stills. So I'm focused on that, and so I'm just constantly out there. And that morning I got an incredible photo of this hind. She would be the most pregnant Sambar hind you've ever seen. She was like a barrel. And she was being followed by a calf from the previous calf. He was just growing his pedicle, so he was about 8 months of age, 7, 8. He was just growing them. Anyhow, she couldn't have been more than a week or two off calving. But she's on this steep mountain face. She goes to a tree where I videoed a stag in velvet a week before preaching. She goes to that tree, and she, in her pregnant condition, stands vertical on this steep mountain face to smell that very spot where he had diverted oil from his preorbital glands. She's vertical. It was bloody amazing. I got great footage of it. Anyhow, this calf of hers comes along, and he tries to copy the mother, and he couldn't get high enough up the tree to get a balancing point with his head on the trunk. So he basically falls over, and you can tell he was pretty embarrassed. It was actually quite funny. So that was the morning before I broke my ankle.
Fuck. But you got the images.
mate. And the week before, I got the video of the stag in velvet preaching on that same tree. So this is what I've learned. The longer you're out there studying Sambar, I've been doing it now for full-time study for 23 years. That's full-time. I've bought places in the bush and lived in the bush to study Sambar every day. But what I've learned is, if you keep going out there, you just keep learning new stuff. And one of the things of note is that where you've got droughts and then years of plenty of rain, years of average rain, then plenty of rain like we've had the last 3 or 4 years here in Victoria, compared to 3-year droughts or 10-year droughts, all these overlays and the way the deer behave changes. The way they feel cold changes. How long it takes them to, how far they have to travel for feed changes. How quickly they can fill up changes. Their fat cover changes. Their antler growth changes. The size of antlers, of course, changes. The weight and size that they can grow to. So you see all these variables occur in different seasonal or, I suppose, annual cycles of conditions. And that's probably one of the things I've been able to learn by staying at it for so many years through so many good and bad cycles, droughts, years of plenty, years of average. But look, getting back to what you're saying, the guy coming from Queensland or interstate, at the price of fuel and everyone's time poor, he needs to, the smart thing is to learn about the deer and maximise your opportunity.
It's good advice. We've had a couple of other Sambar hunters that we've spoken to. One in particular was a guide, and he had a similar message, and it was not necessarily self-promotion, but it was certainly, invest in the knowledge and, increase your successes. I've been down a few times. I'm that typical guy that's wandered into the bush and tried to walk them up, and have seen plenty of them running away. And that's just the way it is if you don't know people down there, or you haven't invested in the knowledge, like you say. So yeah, it's good advice.
But you can pick any patch of bush in state forest, and providing it hasn't been flogged by hound hunters who do remove a lot of the deer, they can remove the bulk of the deer from an area. And you go to find out areas that aren't hunted heavily by hound hunters. They may be areas where thermal shooters are trying to exploit it, but they're not going to get all the deer, nor spotlighters. They're not going to get all those deer. And these deer learn. These deer learn about spotlighting. They learn about vehicle. They learn about vehicle noise. They learned. They hear a vehicle come, they're gone before the spotlight even comes out, or the guy can show his thermal. Those deer will still be there. It's just a matter of having the knowledge, applying that knowledge, and you will be successful. Unfortunately, because of the licensing of game management, by game management of licensed pet food shooters now going on to farm fringe properties, unfortunately, they are no longer the great places for a lot of recreational hunters to hunt, because they're paying them per kilo, the farmer per kilo, and they're with thermals. Sambar really have no protection. You've only got to have the wind in the right direction, the breeze in the right direction, and the Sambar has no protection. They just clean out Sambar off farm fringe properties. So they, again, my advice to hunters, ask if you're looking for permission on farm fringe property, ask the question, is this hunted by thermal meat shooters? If the answer is yes, forget it. You're not going to be successful there. I know this for a fact. The deer get cleaned out. So still find yourself state forest. But remember, if you understand the whole wagon wheel principle of hubs, spokes, and what sambar actually do eat, you need to understand that as a part of the whole education. A lot of people think, they only eat browse. They think that grass is only what fallow deer eat and red deer. Well, that's not true. Sambar eat a hell of a lot of grass. They don't just eat browse. But you've got to find those areas and understand photosynthesis. You've got to understand about disturbed areas of logging coops and open areas, and you've got to find those spots. But then you still got to know how to set up properly. You've got to know where the deer are going to be travelling from. That gets back to applying the overlays that are in my book. The overlays tell you where the deer went to bed for the day. They tell you that. So that you know where they went to bed for the day in those weather conditions. You know where they're coming from. When it's freezing cold, they're not coming from the cold south side. They're going to be coming from a warm northeast side. What I'm talking about here is waiting in ambush. You need to know the right equipment to have. And the right equipment is safari slings, bipod shooting sticks, not big heavy tripods or big heavy bog pods. They're not for a sambar hunter. I sell them off my website. Vanguard, Scout, B62, weighs nothing, silent to set up, quick to set up. It's all you need. It's compact. You need basic gear. Safari sling makes all other slings obsolete for sambar hunting. Once you have a safari sling, you wouldn't use anything else.
Quite familiar with them.
What's that?
I said we're quite familiar with them. Yeah.
Right. Well, you understand, the concept. They're just changes all the rules about movement, speed of being able to put up a shot, take a shot, ergonomics, all that. And the other thing about rifles, I'll say, do not buy rifles with noisy, non-ergonomic safety catch, because they are so slow and noisy to get off. If a sambar pops up in front of you, and I know this for a fact, I know blokes who have lost big stags because they were using a 3-position safety. All my safety catches are sliding side ergonomic. One of the best is a Remington 700. You can't knock it off accidentally. It pushes forwards totally silently under pressure as you mount the safari sling. Browning Safari grade rifles, same was 98. My favourite rifle. Totally silent, sliding side safety, but you can't push off accidentally. But as you mount the rifle, it's off automatically. Remington 700 is the same. They're two of the best that spring to mind for not just silent and ergonomic, but you can't accidentally push them off. A lot of other sliding safeties are too easily pushed off. Why am I talking about safety catches? Do not carry a rifle in this so-called half bolt down position but lock. It's totally dangerous. I was asked to publish an article about that once in my magazine, which I ran for 6 years, and I simply refused. I was nearly shot once by a hunter carrying his rifle, Ruger 77 in the half, chambered round, bolt down the first lock. When you fall, which can happen so easily in sambar country, what happens? Your body automatically pushes the bolt down. What do? You grab the safety cap, the pistol grip, and you pull the trigger. It's an instant, it's a reflex action. Totally unsafe. Use a safari sling. Hunt on your own, which is what I've always done. You've got to be loaded. Safety catch on. And here's the other thing, it's absolutely important. Do not play around adjusting safety catches yourself. Trigger weight. You might be able to do that on some of the Seikos, which you've got an Allen key. You can adjust the trigger safely, sear engagement, but that is something that can cause rifles to simply go off when you close the bolt. Do not interfere, change trigger weight. You've got to take that to an experienced, qualified gunsmith. That's probably my tips on rifles and calibers.
What about optics then?
German number 4 reticle is my favourite. It's classic.
Googling German number 4 reticle.
Regular argument with me on that one.
Bright as you can get. I like 50mm 56. Look, if you can afford the best optics, if you can afford to buy Swarovski Z6Is and Z8s, for example, you can get away with 42mm objectives because they're so bright at 42. They're amazing. But your average stuff, like, for example, I sell Vixen online, made in Japan, absolutely bright as. I start with 50mm objective, and my favourite is still 56. Because when you're hunting sambar and you're in close and dark gullies, you'll have sambar coming in close to dark animal, low light, 56 max, and I always go for illuminated red dot, fine red dot. But if you've got a German number 4 to start with, even if you haven't got a red dot or your red dot fails, battery goes flat, a German number 4 with not too fine across in the middle is the best. It's the best. Nothing beats it. That's my opinion.
I certainly like the number 4, or and there's a couple of variances of it, but that idea of that, that post and the way, and even if it's not a illuminated reticle, I've got a Z6 Swaro that I carried for a number of years that was number 4, but not illuminated, but it's certainly that it does tend to drive your eye to the target. I'm not sure how they fluked it, but it's certainly when you bring it up to your eye, it does bring that target into the scope very well. I'm not sure exactly how, but it certainly does.
Yeah, well, the side, the thick bars, bottom and two sides. Well, yeah, they do that. They drive. That certainly drives your eye instinctively to the centre. Providing your centre cross isn't too fine, then that'll serve you in very low light for shots at dark sambar.
And there's a number of variances of it. There's a 4 and there's a 4i, and I've seen a number of other variances. But that idea that the combination of heavy and lighter crosses certainly does. It's really a very. I find it very pleasing to shoot with it. It's actually just it kind of makes sense when you look at it.
Yeah, I sell Vixen online. I was the Vixen distributor for 10 years. And I think Vixen, German number 4, is the best I've ever seen. They have absolutely nailed it. And Vixen make all the Vixen optics made in Japan are made for the European market. That's what they're made for. Low light, sit and wait, high seed hunting. But they have really perfected that. I don't like the German number 4 that's gets quite fine in the centre cross because you're just going to lose it in very low light on a dark animal.
Yeah, and I take it you need good binoculars.
So there was a look, binoculars are so good today. If you buy good quality binoculars today, the optics are so good. You don't need bigger than 42mm diameter. When I started guiding in 2000, I had Swarovski 8x56.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they weighed 46 ounces. But I didn't carry a rifle. I was a guy. I wasn't there to shoot. So I was happy to carry these huge 8x56. But today, a Swarovski 8x42 is so bloody bright. You don't need to go bigger. You don't need to go to 50, even 50. I was having this conversation with a guy today. He asked me, he rang me up. He just bought the book, actually, and I rang him up to ask him why he bought the book, and we got talking, and he wanted to know about binos. I said, just buy yourself a top quality 8x42 is what I prefer. I've done a lot of testing, comparison testing between 8s and 10s. The image size between 8 and 10 is not even detectable. But when you're in Sambar country, you're walking hills. It's not flat going. You're carrying a day pack. You've got a rifle. 8x42s has got far less handshake. As soon as you go to 10, you've increased magnification by 25%. You've increased handshake. And the only way, and this is why safari sling is so important, you've got to have the rifle across here, your waist, not sticking up in the air, catching Sambar with the movement, catching the eye, and falling off your shoulder all the time, constantly readjusting. But safari sling enables you to put both hands on your binos. And in Sambar country, that's essential. You must eliminate handshake to see the detail. These deer, when they're bedded, you're only going to see small amounts of detail. You're not going to see a complete deer. Unless, of course, you're blowing the Fox 40 whistle. Then it makes $40,000. Honestly, it makes $40,000 worth of optics obsolete. They stand up and look at you. We're on a training course. There was $40,000 worth of optics. We had a 30 to 70 by 95 Swarovski spotting scope on a tripod. We had 15 by 56 Soros on a tripod, 15 by 56 Leicas on a tripod. We had all sorts of association of 8 by 42 Leicas, Swarovskis, Vixens. We're glassing this place where the overlays told us narrowed the place down to 10% of total forest. The overlay said the deer are there. So we glassed it for an hour. We could not find a deer. It was 11 a.m. by this time, and the guys are pretty hungry. We've been there since first light, 7 a.m. They're freezing cold. It's time to go head to my property at Swiss Creek for lunch. One of the guys said, "Errol, why don't you blow on the whistle? You've been talking about how it'll make them stand up." So I said, "Yeah," and this is the lesson. If you're going to leave a spot and you haven't found the deer, always blow on the whistle before you leave. What happens? I blow on the whistle, I glass that 10% of the total forest where they should be, nothing happened. I waited, I blew one more time, loud as I could. Glassed. Suddenly, there is 7 Sambar standing up, including a huge stag where before $40,000 worth of optics couldn't find us a deer. But a $25 Fox 40 whistle did the trick. And I have done that so many times, it's actually ridiculous. Sorry, Swaro, Zeiss, Lupo, Leica.
Hey, correct me if I'm wrong, but a Fox 40 whistle is a sports whistle. It's not a fox whistle, isn't it?
It's made by a company called Fox 40.
It's a sports whistle.
Yeah, sure.
It's the one that goes on your finger.
No, it's not. No,
Not that one?
I buy them in Blaze Orange lanyard. No, they're a safety whistle. Actually, no, they're actually
like
a
P whistle.
Yeah,
no, it's not. No, it's not. It's not.
not?
It's actually just made for safety. Another reason to carry it: if you were lost and you didn't have a PLB to activate, or seriously injured, and there was a search party, and you had broken ribs, you're not going to be yelled out. The pain will kill you, but you can blow on that whistle. It's amazing. You can hear it. People would hear it from 300 yards away. It's a safety whistle.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Fox 40 Classic.
Sonic Blast.
Fox 40. They're on our website. I've written about it in the Hunt Smart book. It shows you photos of the deer that stood up on training courses.
Oh, interesting. Hey, on that subject of whistles, one of the other questions that I was asked by someone, knowing that we were going to have a chat at some point, was, can I ask about the whistling sound that the deer make to each other? Is it a communicative whistle between the deer, or is that just a myth?
I think the first thing to point out is Sambar are an absolutely solitary, silent animal. Why? Because they evolved with a solitary, lethal predator called a tiger. Sambar did never announce where they are. They do not give themselves away. They are silent. Unlike all northern hemisphere species, you want to name moose, elk, fallow, red deer, which have a rut, as we know, 6-week rut for fallow, it's about the same for red. It's only 3 weeks for moose. It's an actual rut. And of course, we all know how overt it is. Right, all the noise, the stag, the bucks, the males, signalling all the does where they are, urinating over themselves, bringing them into estrus. Absolutely, it's a breeding frenzy. Sambar do not rut. It's the most misused word in the whole Sambar vocabulary. If zonal silence is the most important, the one that's most misleading is that Sambar rut. Sambar do not have a rut. They had in evolution, there was no reason to have a rut. The reason there's a rut in northern hemisphere species is because of the extreme winters of -20, -40 degrees. All the food covered in snow. They couldn't afford to have a situation where calves' offspring was born in winter. They'd all perish. Evolution has dictated that all the fawns are born in mid-spring, where there's plenty of grass, there's no snow, temperatures are mild, the mothers are able to find enough forage to produce enough milk to nurture them. But that's northern hemisphere. That's why there's a rut. Sambar come from South Asia. There are no extreme temperatures in South Asia other than heat. For example, in India, where Sambar came from, in Ranthambore, the winter, which is based upon November, December, January, the average daytime temperature is 24 degrees in winter, not -20, not -40. The lowest average nighttime temperature is 11 degrees, not -10, 20, 30 degrees. Evolution didn't require these deer to have a rut. They have a very long, prolonged breeding period. There's no absolute synchronization of antler casting, antler breeding in Sambar as there are in northern hemisphere species. It does not happen.
Errol, is it fair to say though that if you're monitoring a herd of deer on your farm,
yep,
that they have their localized rut period at the same time every year?
No,
they could change.
No, because it's all about when they actually come in hard antler. And they do not come in hard antler at the same time. You've got Sambar in hard antler in February. You got them in December.
Yeah, but does that change
every month?
Does that group of stags that you would be watching, they would go through a cycle? Does that cycle wouldn't change every year? It might change a little bit. Generally, is that same stag going to be in hard antler at the same time every year?
No, it's not about a group. It's about each individual deer's cycle.
Interesting.
It's individual. It's not a group thing. I've had to let stags go in June that had 12 inches of soft antler. Huge stags. When typically in the last 2 weeks of May and first 2 weeks of June, a lot of your big 30-inch stags are actually rubbing out. But it's not total synchronization. It's not like in northern hemisphere species. You got calves being born almost any time of the year with Sambar. It doesn't happen with northern hemisphere species for the reason already pointed out. Evolution determined it can't happen. They have to be born in mid-spring when the temperatures are mild, there's plenty of feed, no snow cover, and so the mothers are able to obtain enough food to nurture them. But Southeast Asian species are a total different breeding system, antler cycle system to Northern Hemisphere. And I think it's important to understand that. So a lot of hunters who come to Victoria are used to hunting rutting species such as red and fallow would expect to find Sambar or some type of mating call.
Hmm.
They don't have a mating call. You know, if you watch a fallow buck, you know, he's overt, he's throating, he's urinating, he's going off his tits, he's dragging hinds into his leg, does into his leg to breed them. When a sambar brings a hind into estrus, which they do through their distributing their sex pheromones through the urine in wallows and scrapes by the preaching trees, that deer, he's brought them in. They come into estrus, a 3-day cycle, 1 day coming in, 1 day at peak estrus, 1 day going out. Those stags take those hinds off in the most caressing, quiet, secretive love affair. It's absolutely nothing like your Northern Hemisphere's rutting species. And they go off on their own. You're not going to hear noises. Sure, there is some noise. There's squeaking of sambar-like birds. There's some mewing between, but it's all really low volume. You've got to be close to hear it. Very close. Mm. The only sound that sambar make, and it's got nothing to do with, that I can tell, to do with the breeding system. And I wrote an article about this in issue 3 of our magazine. Sambar do bellow. Stags will bellow like a domestic bull. And it's not frequently heard. It's fairly irregular. But from time to time, hunters have heard it and have absolutely zeroed in on the stag that was doing it for long enough to enable them to actually get close enough and actually observe it. But it's actually bellowing like a domestic bull. So, sambar are very quiet, secretive animals. But they're very social too. I can tell. I could. There would be plenty of hunters who will disagree with me about the rutting and rut, but I follow the science, and I've studied the scientific reports that have been done, for example, at Massey University in New Zealand, and you know, they have done absolutely intense, in detail, comparative studies between sambar and red deer, for example, done for the reason of assessing the suitability of sambar for farming in New Zealand, and they found that young sambar stags get 2 spikes of testosterone throughout their hard antler period, but the mature breeding stags of 8 to 12 years, that is the peak breeding period, age 8 to 12, they got up to 4 and more spikes. And that's to keep them in breeding condition during that whole 5.5 months that they actually carry antlers. Now, in Northern Hemisphere species, at the start of the rut, they get 1 massive spike. This applies to moose, reds, fallow, elk. Huge spike of testosterone. And that's what keeps them in breeding condition for that, as I said, in elk, red, fallow, about 6-week rut. And then it drops off to almost nothing. With sambar, and that's over. The breeding is over. But sambar will stay in breeding condition anytime they're in hard antler for 5.5 months. So it's a very different breeding system, and of course brought about simply by evolution. And evolution is determined by the weather and the weather conditions of Asia, South Asia, as opposed to the totally different weather conditions of the Northern Hemisphere winters. But I'll be interested to hear what you guys think about that.
I think there's so many concepts and ideas that float around. Just what I was asking a minute ago. I had assumed that if a deer was in hard antler in December, then that deer had its own little local season, and it would be in hard antler in December every year, and you could get to know that in its little local group. Clearly, I was wrong about that.
No, you're right for the individual animal.
Oh, for the individual.
If he's in hard antler in December, look in volume 3 in the Huntsmart book, I've got absolute cracker trail camera photos of monster stags at walleyes. But some of them are there at late December, when a lot of stags have already started casting way back in September, October, November.
So I think
he's still
what
there
fascinates me about sambar hunting, because we chase red and fallow. They're in that condition for a specific time of the year. You could really get to know a specific animal down in Victoria, or 2 or 3 of them that are in different cycles. And you don't have every man and his dog necessarily, booking up the prime time of sambar hunting, because it's not the same thing. I think that's really interesting.
You will
it certainly is, that's for sure.
Well, the individual stag will keep the same antler cycle. No doubt about that. He'll keep that throughout his life. But it's an individual cycle. It's not a herd cycle. In fallow and red deer and elk, it's a herd cycle.
Yeah.
It's synchronization. It's total synchronization. If you look in the Huntsmart book in volume 3, you'll then see cracker stags at walleyes, 30 inch plus, in hard antler in February as well. If you look, I've had trail cams running for, I've been running them for well over 20 years, nearly 30 years. I used to run the old system where you had a receiver, transmitter, Olympus weatherproof camera. That's how unsophisticated they were, and they had to break a beam. We have calves on trail cameras, young calves, in December. There's no total synchronization. And it was interesting when the bushfires hit. I walked the rivers after 203 fire. I walked the Mitamita River, and there was 80 sambar burnt where that river valley was moonscaped by a feral fire, or what's now known as a catastrophic. But then you saw the carcasses. Nothing escaped that fire. So you saw these carcasses of calves of all different sizes. Again, because there is no synchronization of the birthing.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, look, I've got it on fallow, and of course, I got it for years on fallow. Saw lots of fallow. In April, when you want to shoot fallow for meat, I'd always choose 6-month-old females that have been dropped in October. And they're all the same size because they're all dropped at the same time. And in April, they were just a perfect eating size and better meat you just could not buy. But they all are the same size, same weight. It's not true for sambar.
That's really interesting.
Good point. I've got one more question I wanted to ask. Came again from one of the listeners. And the question was, since the beginning of your writings, The Secret of the Sambar series, what is one of your most standout moments whilst being out in the bush?
Standout moment of being in the bush. Gosh, I think watching that sambar, absolutely pregnant, stand behind, totally bipedal on an absolute steep face, to smell that spot where that stag had scent mark preached the week before, and that only happened 7 weeks ago.
That's amazing.
That was an absolute standout.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. The fact that you've been doing this since the 70s and one of your most standout moments was in recent days tells everyone that you don't learn at all. You're still seeing things that you haven't seen before after all that time, which I think is fantastic.
And here's another one. I'm videoing a sambar hind in her bed at 260 yards below me, right? The calf's there, no problem. I watch them for hours. I record. And by the way, one of the things I constantly record is temperature. It's one of the most important things for hunters to know. I use a kestrel weather meter. Ambient temperature is one of the most important things that drive sambar behaviour. Now, I'm watching them for hours. I saw them from first light. And I'll just make this point. In my study, I use my police investigation skills. I learned covert surveillance of criminals. I learned all this stuff. You don't let criminals know you're working on them or watching them, because what's it do? It totally changes their behaviour. They're no longer doing what they normally do. You want to know what they do. So when I started studying sambar, I use exactly the same skills. I got wonderful in-close photos when I was at the Bunyip enclosure. I couldn't actually better those in terms of detail. However, when I started studying sambar, if you get in close to get those beautiful in-close photos, with the DSLR cameras of that time, not so now with the new mirrorless, because there's totally silent shutters. But you would only get a couple of bursts of those motor drives, and the deer's gone. So you got great photos, but you've lost the opportunity for the whole day of watching what that deer actually does all day. So I never focused on that. I never went that route. I went the covert surveillance route, watching from a distance. And as a result, I bought the best lenses. I mean, I paid $23,000 just for one lens, 800 5.6 Nikon. So I could video and photograph deer from 250 yards away, up to 400 easily. And the reason was, I wanted to know what sambar did all day, not what they do for a few seconds. So I used to watch sambar from first light. I would always be in the bush at first light. I apply the overlays. I knew where the deer were going to be. I went to the vantage point looking at that spot where they were going to be. And then I use all those techniques. Do not let your scent get into that gully. Do not be skylined. And I watched those deer, photographed those deer, made notes all day, temperatures. Some days I'd stay there all day. I wanted to know if the deer got up and moved. If they did get up, what did they do? Did other deer come and visit them? What did they do when they got up at 4:30? Because what they did, they got up to feed. But where did they go to feed? I wanted to know the answers to all these questions. So between training courses, I went out on my own, always on my own, for 4 days at a time. I would do this type of study all day, taking the temperatures every 30 minutes, before first light, at first light, right through the day. And then at night, I would go back to the camp, write up notes. And when I came home, I would type up all the notes as a file. I would download all the photos, select them into the best, and then the final selection. I would file the details, the Word file with all those photos, which had the date, time, temperature range right through the day, wind, whatever the weather conditions were, which became an incredible reference, because when I wanted to write the Hunt Smart book, all I had to do was go to those photos, and I had every bit of absolutely essential fields of information that the hunter needs to know And in the HuntSmart book is all those information. I've got the close-up photo of the deer. The close-up photo has been then converted to a small orange icon. And then I've got the wide-angle photo of the gully. Then my wife used all her design skills to put those deer exactly where they were, so you got context. Here's the whole wide-angle gully. This is where the deer were. Exactly. And I've got wide-angle photos of the deer in those spots as well, the actual deer. So then I did large captions and dropped in all that data: date, time, temperature, weather conditions, what the deer did. And I must say, if it hadn't been for my wife being a book designer by trade, and a very talented one and a very patient one, my books would never have seen the light of day. But look, I think the HuntSmart book, from a design point of view, is a work of art, and I just take my hat off to my wife. It's a bloody cracker in terms of design. But her attitude was, she just stayed there and did as many hours as it took to perfect it. Now, if we had taken that text to a book designer at $100 an hour, what they charge in the photos, we would have got nothing like that book. So, I'm very fortunate and privileged that Lynn, my wife, is such a wonderful book designer, and as a result, we've been able together to create these books. By the way, she doesn't give herself much credit for all this.
No, but it's nice to hear that you do that. Not
Well,
just here,
I
but
need to,
on your
because
website and in other places. You're always praising her work, and it's really good to hear.
Look, Dick Power, the late Dick Power, Dick wrote 2 articles for almost every magazine we published, issues 1 to 18. He wrote them on Sambar in close. He was a master of in close. He was an incredible in close Sambar photographer with no equal. He was an incredible big game hunter from all around the world. This is how he wrote these stories for us, and his Sambar stuff on in close photography. And he said he'd been all around the world and bought books from all around the world and never seen design that matched Lynn's. He thought her design was just absolutely outstanding. So coming from Dick, that really meant something.
Oh, that's great. Mark, any final questions? I know we're running to time, and I think that's a really good place to wrap it with those notes. But Mark, did you have any other questions? You're on mute, buddy.
Got some background noise with kids running around. Look, not really a question. I'm just still considering this idea about your observations about Sambar behaviour in regards to their evolutionary environment, and I suppose I'm trying to think how that translates to reds, because the reds we have in Queensland are not living the same environment as the reds where they came from, the northern hemisphere. So first things is their calendar's 180 degrees out of sync. So it's actually interesting observation. And I suppose I'm just trying to think about how that actually falls together. So it's not really a question. It's just something I've been thinking about since you mentioned that. Because certainly, if you think about reds here, they don't have to breed to weather conditions. There is no, in fact, if you think about it, it would probably be better for a red in southern Queensland to drop going into winter rather than going into summer in terms of, in terms of environmental conditions. So it's quite an interesting observation, that one.
So throughout, these red deer evolved in their northern hemisphere habitat for thousands and thousands.
Yeah, about from the end of
thousands of years. So
end of Ice Age.
So this breeding system is just ingrained in their DNA. You can transplant them anywhere, but this is ingrained in them. But it's exactly the same with Sambar. Sambar were hunted by tigers for according to the fossil records that I can come up with, at least 12,000 years.
Ice Age,
Now,
basically, yeah.
Yeah. Now, Sambar aren't just hunted by tigers. Recent research in India has proven that Sambar are actually their favourite prey, their preferred prey of tiger. Tigers will hunt and kill Sambar before all other species. Now, before the proliferation of firearms, invention of nitrate powder, there were absolutely thousands and thousands of tigers in South Asia. So Sambar were harassed by them. If Sambar weren't going to be the next meal, they had to be constantly on guard with thousands and thousands of tigers. So this has just become absolutely the anti-predator strategies that Sambar developed to avoid tigers in particular, but not just tigers. Because the cave paintings in Benelli in India also show that Sambar are more represented in terms of hunting paintings, hunting scenes of primitive man than any other species as well. So primitive man also appears to have favoured Sambar. And that's interesting because during the occupation, the occupation of India by the British Army infantry officers, such as Alexander Inglis, Robertson, Glassfitter, wrote Musings of an Old Shikari and others, they regarded Sambar as a far better challenge than hunting tigers. Tigers
Did
were
you see the
relatively
pictures,
easy.
Errol? Did you see those pictures?
Beg your pardon?
Did you see the pictures
Pitch.
when you were witnessing the cave art? Were they photos or did you see the pictures?
I bought the book.
Right.
I bought the book on cave art of Benelli.
Did they all have antlers?
They've always got antlers.
Yeah. So is it a prey thing, or is it an idol? A worshipping idols? Is it a trophy thing like it is in modern day? It's interesting they always have antlers.
Well, if you go, look, I'm into anthropology. I've got a whole selection of books of cave paintings from all around the world, no matter where I bought the books. It doesn't matter where they appear. Spain, France, Africa, Benelli. The animals being hunted are always males.
Yeah.
They've always got horns or antlers. There's never females with no antlers.
There's never cellar. Sorry.
Here's the other striking thing. The animals are always painted ornately. The hunter is always represented as nothing more than a stick figure. I've never seen in a cave painting an ornately ochre painted hunter, Homo sapien. They're always just a stick figure. But the animals are often so innately painted. And I think it goes to tell us about what Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Power of Myth, who lived with First Nation people all his life to study them, found. The animal was everything. The animal was their existence. It provided everything. It provided food, utensils, clothing, hides, sinews for clothing. The man was not important. The animal was revered. And the cave paintings, simply, to my mind, just bear out that absolute fact. I think it's a fascinating subject.
Jono?
I don't have a question. I'm just conscious of time, but what I did have was a thank you to you, Errol, for many years ago, before I moved to Australia, my wife actually bought me Secrets of the Sambar Volume 1 and Volume 2, and that was my first introduction to hunting in Australia. I've read both books cover to cover many times. Forgotten a lot about it, and today's been an education, but I really wanted to say thank you to you because those books were my introduction to hunting in Australia. I'm actually yet to go and hunt sambar, but one day I hope to. But yeah, thank you from me.
Well, thanks, Jono, and a great thank you to your wife for supporting the Secrets of the Sambar way back then. So where
I'm
did
originally
you
from South
actually
Africa,
come
but I was
from?
living in England. I was there for 12 years, and we decided to make the move to Australia. Right. And my wife, she did some research and found your books and bought them for me.
Well, I'm wrapped. I'm stoked that your wife bought those for you.
You must appeal to the hunter's wife, because my wife did the same thing. And if I recall, you made the phone call to her to ask why she was buying it, and she's like, I don't know, my husband just liked deer, and I thought it was appropriate. And you had a good old chat with her at the time, which was really great.
Ah, right. Well, yeah, I often like to make contact. I'm not an email or a text person. I find in what I do, it's good to ring and talk to people why they bought the book. And I spoke to this guy for half an hour today. He bought, I think he bought the book and the safari sneakers. The last pair of crooked horn safari sneakers, probably for sale on Earth, because the crooked horn have gone broke. And when they were going broke, I bought all the safari sneakers they had left. I had a good chat to him, and it was interesting. Should I? And I gave him a few tips, and I didn't charge him for the consultation.
Clearly not an
account. I told him about the basic things he needs to get. He's got the book, get the safari sling, get the whistle, get the bipod shooting sticks, get the 3-legged stool, because you must always set up on a stool. Do not sit on the ground. It's an absolute no-no. And, forget all the rest of the rubbish you can buy. You don't need it. Good binos, good scope, good bullet in your rifle, and understand the animal. And that's it.
Oh, that's good advice. So I'll wrap it up and just say a big thanks from me, or from all of us, really. It's been a great conversation. Everyone knows that you've got this wealth of knowledge, and there's no way you can talk about all of it over a 2-hour session. But one thing that the listeners really wanted to hear was I guess for you to talk about the work that you've put together on a podcast, so they can put the sound of a voice to the books that they read, and to get to understand a little bit more about the man who is Errol Mason. So from us to you, thank you very much. I think it's been a fantastic couple of hours. Love to have you back at some point to deep dive into a couple of other topics. But for now, I think that's been a fantastic couple of hours, Errol. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Thanks, Jono. Thanks, Mark. And as you must have picked up, mate, I'm just passionate about sambar, passionate about talking about them, and I love teaching people everything there is to know. Because, what we want to do, we want to continue the generation of hunters. We want to help continue that tradition. As you'll note in the cave paintings, there are none of people growing lettuce.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Stuff. All right, we'll leave it on that note.
That's my last word.
Good
stuff. All right, mate. Well, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again.
Errol.